Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another video of Learn with Laraib. Today we will be discussing diencephalon. Diencephalon is a part of embryonic brain which matures into thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus and subthalamus. Subthalamus is a part of basal ganglia and we will discuss it later. Today we will be discussing hypothalamus specifically. So hypothalamus is basically responsible for hemostasis in our body. And there's an MCQ asking, what is the main regulant of ANS, the autonomic nervous system? That will be hypothalamus. Now it maintains the homeostasis by regulating the thirst and water balance. It also regulates the temperature, the hunger, and sexual urges. So now we will look at the diagram of the hypothalamus. Again, as in every video I tell you, this is not drawn to scale. This is just for learning purposes. So let's suppose this is hypothalamus. It has an anterior portion, a medial portion, and a posterior portion, and it is attached with pituitary gland. So first for the label things, in anterior portion there is an anterior commissure present, there is mammillary body present along with hypothalamus as well. So let's discuss nucleus by nucleus so you can remember as well. We will start with the anterior portion. The anterior portion, this one over here is the preoptic nucleus, which is mainly responsible for sexual behavior, and it generates or releases GnRH. Now GnRH is a hormone, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, which then travels to the pituitary and then it stimulates the production of FSH and LH. When this is generated in pulsatile manner, it is useful for us. So if it's not released in pulsatile manner, it will not be useful. So this is important for puberty. And failure of GnRH producing hormone will result in Kallmann syndrome, also signifies primary amenorrhea. Now coming on, this was preoptic nuclei, the preoptic one. Now you can see a clock over here. This clock will make this easy. This is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is responsible for mainly for the circadian rhythm of the body. So it will see when the sun is rising, when it's falling, so it will be responsible for circadian rhythm of the body, release hormones accordingly. For example, cortisol is mainly released a lot in the morning. And then we have it for the visual input in retina as well. But the most important one is the circadian rhythm, and this is asked a lot in MCQ. Now coming on to the other nuclei of anterior part of hypothalamus which are important, one of which is supraoptic clear. So supraoptic over here, as you can see with the blue color denoted, is related with water. So it releases ADH via the posterior pituitary. So ADH is released via posterior pituitary. It is released with the help of neurophysions, and ADH is responsible for water reabsorption in kidney. And in case no ADH is produced, it can result in central diabetes insipidus. So when they are released via neurophysions, they are stored in posterior pituitary and then they are released via posterior pituitary. Now we have done supraoptic, suprachiasmatic, preoptic. We will move on to paraventricular nuclei, which is responsible mainly for release of oxytocin. Oxytocin is released in the same way as ADH is. It is transferred to posterior pituitary via neurophysions and then stored over there and released when needed. So this was all for the anterior part of the hypothalamus. Important MCQs, as we discussed, were from suprachiasmatic, and then GnRH is released in pulsatile manner, will induce puberty, ADH and oxytocin via posterior pituitary via neurophysions. ADH is for water reabsorption. A decrease in ADH will result in central diabetes insipidus, and if GnRH is absent, it will result in Kallmann syndrome or primary amenorrhea. Now moving on to the medial portion, the important nucleus present over here for us is ventromedial nucleus. The ventromedial nucleus is responsible for fullness, as it is the satiety center. So whenever you eat something, this is the part of brain which helps you feel full, and this when absent can result in obesity or hyperphagia. So a lot of MCQs come from here. The ventromedial nucleus is responsible for making you full. That means once you have eaten, it will make you stop. Now, on the contrary, the lateral hypothalamic area is responsible for feeding and is known as feeding center. So ventromedial was satiety center and lateral hypothalamic will be feeding center, and it will be excited in hunger and it will urge us to eat. Absence of this will now result in aphasia or anorexia. Here I would like to also add some important hormones regarding appetite. Whenever ghrelin is present, it will increase the appetite, and whenever leptin is present, it will decrease the appetite. Now we know about ventromedial and lateral hypothalamic area. They are very important regarding MCQs and their functions. So we will discuss about the posterior part of the brain, and it has the posterior hypothalamic nuclei, and we will talk about it as posterior hypothalamus. Now this is mainly responsible for temperature and it is sensitive to cold. So when it's sensitive to cold, it will generate warmth. That means it will increase the temperature in our body. So the heating or the sympathetic heating is controlled by posterior hypothalamus. On the contrary, the cooling effect will be by the anterior nucleus. So the posterior nucleus was responsible for heating. Anterior nucleus will be responsible for cooling, which means it's sensitive to warmth. So remember it by the mnemonic AC. AC is responsible for cooling our room. So cooling and anterior nucleus are correlated. Again, these are very important MCQs. The ventromedial area is responsible for fullness, lateral for feeding, posterior for temperature, specifically heating the body, and anterior for temperature, specifically cooling the body. Other than that, we did suprachiasmatic nucleus, which was responsible for circadian rhythm, preoptic for sexual behavior and GnRH release, optic, supraoptic for ADH, and then paraventricular for oxytocin. So this was all for hypothalamus. At the end, I would like to add another bonus MCQ point, which is that we often encounter an opioid peptide which is released from this part of brain and is associated with pain is beta endorphin. We will discuss in detail about this later on. So I hope you were able to understand what hypothalamus is. Our next video will be on thalamus. Please stay tuned and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.